3 months ago, I was your typical workaholic CEO. 40 years old, never married, no kids, living in a Manhattan penthouse that was more like a museum than a home. My life revolved around Crawford Industries, the company my family built. I measured success in quarterly profits and board meetings. I thought I had everything figured out. Then my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in an emergency board meeting about a Shanghai acquisition when an unknown number called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Papai, Daddy." The voice was small, trembling, desperate. A little girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. I froze. I'd never been married, never had kids. Someone clearly had the wrong number. "I think you have the wrong number, sweetheart," I said, my usual commanding tone softening involuntarily. "Please don't hang up. Don't." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. "I found your number in Mommy's work phone. She said if we were ever really, really scared and she couldn't help us, we should call this number and say that word. She said you'd understand how serious things were." Through the phone, I could hear other children crying softly in the background. "What's your name, honey?" "Madison. I'm almost 11, and my twin sisters Zoe and Mia are 7. Mommy came home from her night cleaning job this morning, but she collapsed and won't wake up properly. We don't have any food left, not even the stale bread from 2 days ago." Reddit, I want you to understand something. I was sitting in a boardroom discussing million-dollar deals, and suddenly nothing mattered except this scared little girl on the phone. "Where are you, Madison?" "I don't know the exact address. We live in the apartment above the old bakery that closed down. The windows are boarded up, and there's a big crack in the wall where the rain comes in." She was describing poverty that existed just miles from my penthouse, but felt like a different universe. "Madison, is your mommy there? Can I talk to her? She's breathing, but she just moans when I try to wake her. I'm scared something's really wrong, but I don't know any doctors or anybody else to call." Then came the question that changed everything. "Madison, what's your mommy's name?" "Rachel Martinez, but that's her married name. Before she married my stepdad, her name was different. I think it was Rachel Santos." The name hit me like lightning. Rachel Santos. 11 years ago, Rachel Santos, the woman with warm brown eyes and a laugh that could light up entire rooms, the woman who cleaned the evening shift at Crawford Industries, who'd always smile when she emptied my trash during late nights at the office, the woman who disappeared from my life without explanation after we'd spent 6 months finding excuses to talk to each other, sharing coffee in empty hallways, and falling in love despite the differences in our worlds. "Madison," my voice cracked, "what does your mommy look like?" "She has long brown hair, but it's not shiny anymore, and she has pretty eyes that used to smile a lot, but now they look sad all the time. She's 37, and she works cleaning offices at night when she's not too sick. She used to work at a really tall building downtown before we moved here." My hands trembled against the phone. This was Rachel, the woman I'd searched for desperately 11 years ago, who'd vanished right around the time my father's security chief had recommended tightening protocol around executive floors. "Madison, sweetie, I need you to do something very important for me. Try to wake up your mommy again. Tell her that James Crawford is on the phone and that I'm coming to help." "You know my mommy?" Before I could answer, I heard shuffling, then Madison's voice becoming distant. "Mommy, wake up. There's a man on the phone who says he knows you. His name is James Crawford." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a sharp intake of breath, and Rachel's voice, weak but unmistakably hers. "Give me the phone right now." My heart pounded as I heard whispered conversation, footsteps, and finally Rachel's voice, hoarse but filled with shock and something that sounded like panic. "James, is it really you?" "Rachel." The name came out like a prayer. "My God, Rachel. I looked for you after you stopped showing up for work. I tried to find you, but you just vanished." "James, I can't do this conversation right now. Madison shouldn't have called you. We'll figure something else out." "Figure what out, Rachel?" 3 children called me for help because their mother is unconscious and they have no food. I don't care what happened between us 11 years ago. I care about making sure those little girls are safe tonight. Through the phone, I heard Madison's voice. Mommy, is the man really coming? Will he bring medicine to make you feel better? Rachel's sigh was heavy with exhaustion and defeat. James, this isn't your responsibility. Maybe not, but I'm making it my responsibility. Give me your address. You don't understand. Things are complicated. Madison, Rachel's voice trailed off, and I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh, God, what has she been taught to call you? She called me Daddy, Rachel. Is there something you need to tell me? The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Rachel whispered, 1247 Bleecker Street, apartment 3B above the old Giovanni's Bakery. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Rachel. James, we're going to talk about everything. As I hung up, my hands shook. I turned back to the boardroom where my executives waited. Gentlemen, we're postponing this meeting indefinitely. Cancel everything on my schedule for tomorrow. Sir, the Shanghai deal will wait. Read it. As my private elevator descended toward the garage, I realized my carefully controlled world was about to change forever. The math was becoming clearer by the second. 11 years ago, Madison almost 11 now. Driving through Rachel's neighborhood felt surreal. The Mercedes felt absurdly out of place navigating narrow, pothole-filled streets. 1247 Bleecker Street stood before me, like a monument to broken dreams. The Giovanni's Bakery sign hung at an angle, several letters missing. The boarded windows were covered in graffiti, and the smell of stale garbage mixed with something I couldn't identify. I sat in my car for a moment, my mind racing back to 11 years ago. Rachel had been different from other employees. While most of the evening cleaning crew avoided eye contact with executives, Rachel had always smiled and wished me a good evening. Our conversations had started small. Comments about the weather, questions about whether I needed my trash emptied, but gradually those brief exchanges had become the highlight of my 18-hour days. Rachel was studying business part-time, working the cleaning job to pay for classes. She was intelligent, funny, and refreshingly unimpressed by my title or my family's money. In a world where everyone wanted something from me, Rachel had seemed to want only my company. Then one night, Rachel simply didn't show up for work. Her supervisor said she called in claiming a family emergency. When she didn't appear the following night or the night after that, I tried to find her. But Rachel Santos had vanished completely. No forwarding address, no contact information beyond the employee file that listed an apartment that was empty by the time I got there. Now, staring up at the crumbling building, I felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on me. I grabbed the bags of groceries I'd hastily purchased, enough food to feed a family for weeks, and headed toward the unmarked door beside the boarded bakery front. The stairwell reeked of mildew and something worse. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, and several steps creaked ominously under my weight. By the time I reached the third floor, my expensive shoes were covered in grime. Apartment 3B's door was scarred with scratches and dents. The number 3 hung upside down, held by a single bent nail. I knocked softly. The door opened a crack, revealing a chain lock and a pair of large blue eyes peering up at me. "Are you James?" The voice was small but brave. "You must be Madison." I knelt down to be at eye level with the crack in the door. "I brought food and some medicine for your mom, sweetheart." "Hold on." Madison's voice was mature beyond her years as she called over her shoulder, "Mommy, he's here." The chain rattled, and the door swung open. Madison was smaller than I'd imagined from our phone conversation, painfully thin, with dirty blonde hair that needed washing in clothes that were too small for her growing frame. But her eyes held an intelligence and responsibility that shouldn't have existed in someone not yet 11. "Thank you for coming," she said with the solemn politeness of a child forced to grow up too fast. "Zoe and Mia are with Mommy. She's awake now, but she's still really weak." I stepped into the apartment, and my heart broke. The space was tiny, a single room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. A fold-out couch dominated one wall, where 2 small forms were curled against a woman I almost didn't recognize. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge that hummed loudly, and a sink with a persistent drip. The walls were stained with water damage, and the single window was covered with a sheet instead of curtains. But what struck me most was how clean everything was. Despite the poverty, despite the failing infrastructure, someone had maintained what dignity they could. The few possessions they owned were neatly arranged, and the apartment smelled of generic disinfectant rather than despair. James. I turned toward the voice and felt time collapse. Rachel sat on the couch wearing scrubs that had seen better days, cradling two sleeping children against her sides. At 37, she was still beautiful, but life had carved lines around her eyes and added a thinness to her face that spoke of too many missed meals. Her hair, once glossy and full, was pulled back in a practical ponytail that couldn't hide its brittleness. But her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had haunted my dreams for 11 years, were exactly as I remembered, except now they held a weariness that cut me to the core. Rachel. When I set the grocery bags on the small table, including the fever reducer and vitamins I grabbed at the pharmacy, my God, it really is you. I look different, I know. She wrapped her arms around the sleeping twins defensively. 11 years and 3 children will do that. You look like you've been carrying the world on your shoulders. Madison had begun unpacking the groceries with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, though I noticed her hand shook slightly as she pulled out items they probably hadn't seen in months. Fresh fruit, real meat, milk that wasn't about to expire. Madison, why don't you put some of this food away quietly so we don't wake your sisters? Rachel said gently. Mr. Crawford and I need to talk. As Madison moved efficiently around the tiny kitchenette, I caught Rachel's arm gently. It's still James, and we definitely need to talk. I know what you're thinking, Rachel said quietly, her eyes darting to Madison and back. The timeline, the math. Yes, James, Madison is your daughter. The words I'd been expecting still knocked the breath from my lungs. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was 26 years old, in love with a man whose father had already made it clear I was unsuitable for his heir, and pregnant with a child that would have destroyed everything you'd worked for. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. Your father's security chief approached me the week I found out I was pregnant. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did he say? That there were concerns about security breaches from cleaning staff who had developed inappropriate relationships with executives. That my employment was being terminated immediately for protocol violations, and that if I tried to contact you or make any claims about personal relationships, they had documentation that could make my life very difficult. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father's interference, the mysterious disappearance, Rachel's sudden departure, all made horrible sense now. So you just left without giving me a choice. I gave you the only choice that protected both of us. I changed my last name back to my mother's maiden name, took the savings I had, and moved to Brooklyn. I planned to raise Madison alone and let you have the life your family wanted for you. And you never thought to contact me? Not once in 11 years. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, watching Madison arrange items in the tiny refrigerator. I thought about it every day for the first year. But then I met David Martinez. He was a good man, James, a paramedic who knew I had a daughter and didn't care about who her father was. He married me, adopted Madison legally, gave us his name and his love. What happened to him? Cancer. Diagnosed when the twins were 18 months old, gone 8 months later. No life insurance that covered his condition. Medical bills that ate through everything we'd saved. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Madison was only 4. But she remembers him. He's the only father she's ever known. I processed this information, trying to reconcile the Rachel I'd known with the woman who'd endured so much. But you kept my number. You taught Madison to call me. Rachel looked embarrassed. I work for a building maintenance company now. Different buildings, different shifts. About 3 years ago, I was assigned to Crawford Industries for their weekend deep cleaning rotation. I saw your name on the directory. Saw you had the same office. I updated your contact information from the company directory. You've been cleaning my building for 3 years? Weekend, overnight shifts. You're never there on weekends. But I kept thinking, what if something happened to me? What if the girls had no one? So I taught Madison about the emergency number, told her it was only if things were really, really bad and she had no other choice. But why teach her to call me Daddy? Because I knew if a strange child just called you asking for help, you might think it was a prank or a scam. But if she said that word... Rachel's voice broke slightly. I knew it would get your attention long enough for you to listen. Madison had finished with the groceries and was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, clearly listening to every word despite pretending to be occupied with a worn coloring book. Madison, I said gently, can you look at me for a minute? She raised her eyes, blue-gray eyes that were unmistakably my own, set in a face that was a feminine version of my childhood photographs. Your mom is right. I am your biological father, but I didn't know about you until tonight. If I had known, would you have wanted me? The question was asked with a matter-of-fact tone of a child who'd learned not to expect too much from adults. The question hit me like a hammer blow. Madison, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life. I've spent 11 years wondering what happened to your mom, wishing I could find her again. But you have an important job. Mommy says you're very busy and very successful. I am busy, but being successful doesn't matter if you don't have people to share it with. I moved closer, still keeping a respectful distance. Madison, I know this is all very confusing and scary, but I want you to know that from now on, you and your sisters and your mom are going to be safe. You're never going to go hungry again, and you're never going to have to be afraid. Even Zoe and Mia, even though they're not your real daughters. I glanced at the sleeping twins, their small faces peaceful against Rachel's sides. Even Zoe and Mia. Family isn't just about blood, Madison. It's about choosing to love and take care of each other. One of the twins stirred, opening sleepy blue eyes and staring at the stranger in their apartment with curiosity rather than fear. Are you the food man? She whispered. I'm James, I said softly. And yes, I brought food. Are you Zoe or Mia? I'm Mia. Zoe has a scar on her chin from when she fell off the playground. She pointed to her sister, who was still sleeping. Are you to stay and take care of us? The innocent question hung in the air. Rachel tensed, clearly prepared to intervene, but I answered honestly. I'm going to make sure you're all taken care of, but there's a lot we need to figure out first. Grown-up stuff. Oh, grown-up stuff. Mia nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense. Mommy does a lot of grown-up stuff. Sometimes she cries when she thinks we're sleeping, but then she makes us breakfast and pretends everything's okay. Rachel's face flushed with embarrassment. Mia, that's enough. But I was looking at Rachel with new understanding. How long has it been this bad? Define bad, Rachel said defensively. Rachel. She was quiet for a long moment. 2 years, maybe 3. The rent keeps going up, but the work doesn't pay more. I've been working 60 hours a week just to keep us housed and fed. Sometimes I have to choose between groceries and electricity. And you never thought to call me? And say what? Hi, James. Remember me from 11 years ago? I have your daughter and she's hungry. What if you'd hung up? What if you decided Madison was better off somewhere else? What if you tried to take her away from me? The fear in her voice was real, raw, and it broke something inside my chest. I understood now why she'd stayed away, why she'd taught Madison to call only in the most desperate circumstances. Rachel, look at me. She raised her eyes reluctantly. I would never take Madison away from you. You're her mother. You've raised her, sacrificed for her, kept her safe. But I also won't let any of you struggle like this anymore. We're going to figure this out together. James, I can't just accept charity. It's not charity. Madison is my daughter. That makes you family. And that makes Zoe and Mia my family too. Taking care of family isn't charity. It's responsibility. As if summoned by our conversation, Madison looked up from her coloring book. Are you going to live with us now? Or are we going to live with you? The question was simple, but the answer would change all of our lives forever. I looked around the tiny apartment, at the water stains on the ceiling, the boarded-up windows, the sounds of domestic violence coming from neighboring units. Then I looked at Rachel, exhausted and proud, still the most beautiful woman I'd ever known, and at 3 little girls who deserved so much more than this. We're going to figure that out, I said finally. But first, we're going to make sure everyone is safe and healthy and has enough food. Madison nodded as if this was a reasonable adult answer, but her next question caught me completely off guard. Are you going to marry Mommy? Rachel's face went white. Madison, I'm just asking because on TV, when daddies come back, they usually marry the mommies and then everyone lives happily ever after. I felt my heart racing. Madison, life is more complicated than TV shows. Your mom and I have a lot of things to work through first. But you still love her, right? Because you came when we needed you. And Mommy's eyes look different when she looks at you, out of the mouths of babes. I glanced at Rachel, who was studying her hands with intense concentration. Madison, sometimes grown-ups need time to figure out their feelings. I said carefully. That's okay, Madison said with the wisdom of someone far older than her almost 11 years. But I think you should know that Mommy kept a picture of you in her jewelry box. And sometimes, when she thought we weren't looking, she would take it out and look at it and get sad. Rachel's face turned bright red. Madison, that's enough questions for tonight. But as I processed what Madison had said, I realized that whatever else had happened in the past 11 years, Rachel had never completely let go of what we'd had together, just as I had never stopped wondering what might have been. Right now, I said, standing up, what matters is getting you all somewhere safe and making sure Rachel gets the medical attention she clearly needs. I'm fine. You collapsed from exhaustion and haven't eaten a proper meal in who knows how long. You're not fine. My voice was gentle but firm. I'm taking all of you to my place tonight. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out the rest. James, we can't just move into your penthouse. Why not? Because Rachel struggled to find words. Because it's not appropriate. Because I don't want people to think I'm taking advantage of you. Because the girls don't know you. And change is hard for them. Then we'll take it slow. But Rachel, look around this apartment. Look at your daughters. They deserve better than this, and you know it. Madison had been listening to the entire conversation with the focused attention of someone who understood that her life was about to change dramatically. I think we should go with James, she said quietly. Mia has been having bad dreams because of the scary sounds from downstairs. And Zoe asked me yesterday if we were going to have to start asking people for food again. The last statement hit both adults like a physical blow. Again, I asked. Madison nodded matter-of-factly. When things got really bad last winter, Mommy taught us how to ask for leftover food from restaurants. She said it wasn't begging, it was just asking for help, and that sometimes people threw away good food that we could use. Reddit, I want you to imagine sitting in that moment, imagining Madison and her little sisters approaching strangers for scraps, learning to swallow their pride because hunger was stronger than shame. That's never happening again, I said quietly. Ever. Rachel was crying silently, tears streaming down her face as the weight of their circumstances was laid bare in front of the man she'd loved and lost. I did the best I could, she whispered. I tried so hard to give them a good life. You did give them a good life, I said firmly. You gave them love, stability, values in each other. You kept them together when it would have been easier to give up. Rachel, you're an amazing mother. I'm a mother who had to teach her children to beg for food. You're a mother who taught her children to survive, to be resourceful, to look out for each other. Do you think Madison would be as mature and responsible as she is if she'd grown up with everything handed to her? Rachel looked at Madison, who was now helping Mia put on shoes, while Zoe woke up slowly on the couch. I suppose not. Those girls are incredible because of how you raised them, not despite it. But now they don't have to be so strong all the time. Now they get to just be kids. As the family gathered their few belongings, I understood that this was just the beginning. There would be lawyers to consult, paternity tests to confirm what we all knew, living arrangements to negotiate, and a relationship to rebuild with Rachel while forming new bonds with 3 daughters I had never known existed. But looking at Madison as she helped her sisters pack their backpacks, seeing the hope beginning to replace fear in their eyes, and watching Rachel move through the small space with new purpose instead of defeated exhaustion, I realized that some things were worth depending your entire life for. The most important deal of my life wasn't happening in a boardroom. It was happening in a tiny apartment where a family was finally coming together. 3 months later update. Reddit, I know this is getting long, but I need to finish the story because what happened next proved that fairy tales can come true, but they're messier and more complicated than the movies make them seem. The penthouse elevator ride that first night was silent, except for the twins' whispered amazement at the mirrored walls and soft classical music. When the elevator opened directly into my foyer, all 3 girls went completely still. "This is where you live?" Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast space. The penthouse that I called home for 8 years suddenly felt absurd through their eyes. The Italian marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park, the custom furniture that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. It all looked like museum displays rather than places where real people lived. "It's pretty empty, isn't it?" I said suddenly, seeing my home through their perspective. I always thought it was elegant, but now I think it just looks lonely. Mia reached up to take my hand, her small fingers warm against my palm. "We can help make it less lonely. Madison's really good at making places feel like home." "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Over the next few weeks, the sterile penthouse was transformed. The twins were fascinated by everything. Walk-in closets bigger than their former apartment, bathrooms with separate showers and bathtubs, kitchens with gadgets they'd never seen before. Madison was more reserved, but I caught her running her hands along marble countertops and staring out the windows with wonder she was trying hard to hide. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Madison had nightmares about their old apartment. The twins had moments of overwhelming excitement followed by periods of withdrawal, as if they couldn't quite believe their new circumstances were real. And Rachel fought me on nearly everything. The legal situation was more complicated than I'd anticipated. David Martinez had legally adopted Madison when he married Rachel. Even though he was deceased, that legal adoption didn't automatically disappear just because biological paternity was established. To establish parental rights, we had to petition the court. Then someone filed an anonymous complaint with Child Protective Services, alleging that I was providing an unstable environment for 3 minors. The complaint cited concerns about my work schedule, the unconventional living arrangements, and questions about the children's welfare. I won't bore you with all the legal details, but it turned out the complaint came from Victoria Sterling, a board member of my company who was trying to use my family situation as evidence that I'd become an unfit CEO. The CPS investigation was thorough and invasive, but in the end, they found no evidence of neglect or inappropriate care. In fact, the investigator noted that all 3 children had shown dramatic positive changes in just 2 months. The confrontation with my board was epic. I walked into the boardroom with my resignation letter and essentially told them, accept my family or find a new CEO. Victoria Sterling was forced to resign after I proved she'd filed a false CPS report. 6 months later, I married Rachel in a small ceremony in Central Park, with 3 flower girls who argued over who got to throw the most petals. The adoption papers for all 3 children were finalized the following week. Madison is now 11 and thriving in advanced classes at one of Manhattan's best schools. The twins each have their own bedrooms and have discovered the joy of privacy while still choosing to have sleepovers with each other most nights. Rachel started taking education courses and volunteers at their school. Sometimes Madison asks if I miss my old life. My answer is always the same. "Sweetheart, I didn't have a life before. I just had a career." The Shanghai deal eventually closed successfully, with my family attending the celebration dinner. The partners were so impressed by my ability to balance professional excellence with personal priorities that they offered additional projects. And every morning, when I wake up to the sound of my daughters getting ready for school, Rachel making coffee in our kitchen, and the comfortable chaos of a family starting their day together, I remember that the most important call I'd ever answered hadn't been from a business partner or a board member. It had been from Madison, asking for help and calling me daddy for the first time. Some victories, I learned, are worth more than all the companies in the world.